via Zoom. And sitting as the Board of Appeals are myself as chair, Pete Gerdick as vice chair, Charlie Higginson, Matt Watkins, Lee Darst, and Dave McMorris. And we have some distinguished guests, okay, like Bob Egan. Hey, Bob. And okay, so I'm calling the meeting to order. In terms of board business, we'd just like to confirm the next two meeting dates, which are January 5th and February 2nd.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just trouble you for a roll call vote, opening the meeting.
All right, we have a roll call vote to approve the opening of the meeting?
Just to open the meeting.
Okay, Woody Chidick, aye.
Matt Watkins, aye.
Okay, speak. Lee?
Aye.
Okay, Charlie? Sure.
Yeah.
Sort of, he's on and off. Dave?
Aye.
And Peter, you're muted. You're muted, Pete.
Aye.
All righty. Okay, so we've got the vote.
Thank you.
So we have two dates set tentatively, January 5th and February 2nd. Are there any known conflicts that'll take people out of action?
I'm good.
Okay. Why don't we stay with those dates then? Sounds good. And Jen, you also included in our packet a 12 meeting schedule for the rest of the year.
I did, for people to be able to cross-reference, and then that usually I post that on the website so that applicants can check to see when submittal deadlines and the meetings are. So if no one has any glaring issues, I'll post that, and then we always check at every meeting to make sure everybody can make it for the next meeting.
But it certainly helps to forward plan, yeah.
Right, just for the filing dates.
Okay, so why don't we'll open the meeting with our continued hearings from prior hearings. The first up is 31 River Road, an application filed by Roger Hoyt on behalf of his clients, Randall and Andrea Steele, to construct a new garage. And Roger, have you new information? We did get, I think, a site plan, but why don't you tell us, Roger, if there's new information that we should be aware of or that you'd like to present?
Mr. Chidick, this is Adam Brodsky. Would it be appropriate for me to speak?
Well, of course. All right, sure.
Well, thank you.
You're gonna go 5 for 5 tonight, I think.
I hope everyone had a good holiday. I represent Randall and Andrea Steele, the applicants, and I'm here tonight with Roger Hoyt. And you'll remember that the Steeles were proposing to enlarge and extend their existing one-car garage and workshop, which is non-conforming because it encroaches within the 20-foot side yard. And you may remember that we originally proposed to connect the addition to the existing structure via a pergola. And apparently at some point during the evening, there were some concerns expressed regarding the use of a pergola to connect the two structures. While I think it was perfectly appropriate, we and the clients decided to redesign the project to eliminate the pergola. And so Roger has submitted a revised plans which show us attaching the 24-foot by 24-foot 4-inch addition directly to the existing structure and eliminating the pergola. The Steeles reviewed the plan with their neighbors. The neighbors like the plan. And in fact, the clients actually like this new plan better than the old plan because it minimizes the need to change the existing driveway and moves the addition further away from the existing house. The revised plan lessens the existing nonconformity. At its closest, the addition remains 11.5 feet from the property line, but the other end of the addition is moved further away to 13 feet 2 inches. And so we believe that the proposed use is substantially less detrimental than the existing use to the neighborhood and believe that we qualify for a special permit. And I guess at this point, I'm happy to turn it over to Roger for any technical questions that you may have, but hopefully you have the revised plan in front of you.
I have a question.
Yeah, Dave.
I thought that one of the rationales for having the pergola was to avoid any encroachment upon the floodplain. Does
Right.
the change in plans now encroach upon the floodplain? And if it does, do we have to consider that as part of the application?
Thank you, Mr. McMorris. That is correct. The rationale for using the pergola was to keep the addition outside the floodplain by bringing the addition closer to the existing building. A corner of it does encroach within the floodplain, and we need your guidance as to how you wish to address that. Is that is significant enough encroachment into the floodplain, which would require that we, I guess, amend our application to seek a special permit for work within the floodplain district? Or is it a de minimis encroachment that you would feel comfortable moving forward on the current application? We'll be guided by your instructions on that.
Go ahead, Dave.
Because to David's point, I know I was looking back at my notes and, I don't know that it was the pergola itself that the board had, directly found issue with. I do see in my notes, we had some testimony that the pergola helps to break up the massing of the structure. And then also the second benefit of it was that, without it, you would be building in the flood zone. So I'm just kind of looking at it through the same perspective of David and what that additional impact is.
Yeah, Matt, if I put another way, I think that one of the concerns expressed by the board is the pergola integral to the two structure, to the two, if you will, buildings, or was it there simply as a device? But I don't know if we had any big issue with the pergola. But
Well, I think we had a question if it was only a device. And I guess I think that if we are building in the floodplain, and I don't know how much floodplain is in play here, we probably need to ask questions about the flood compliance of the structure and that sort of consideration. If it's de minimis, it's probably not going to matter too much, but we ought to have the facts before we
I'm always
think about deciding.
wary, Pete, a bit about de minimis, but
Yeah, exactly.
you know,
And I frankly missed the fact that we had a new plan. I thought we just had a site plan. So I have not seen what we had. It wasn't in our packets. It may have been forwarded. So I feel ill-prepared to really come to any conclusions without having seen it.
Just an FYI, it was in the packet and it was emailed. So it's a folded thicker square. It's just an 11 by 17. They were dropped off by Mr. Hoyt.
I have the packet which I picked up yesterday, and I don't believe it was in mine, but I will search for the email if that's something we should do here.
this was page one of 4 pages.
I vaguely remember that as an email. I'm going to go to my
Okay.
laptop and see if I can pull it down.
Well, Adam, could you tell us about the extent, or Roger, the extent to which the structure now is going to be in the floodplain, the new construction?
Yeah, and I'll defer to Roger on that calculation, Mr. Chittick.
Okay. But you're muted, Roger.
Jen, would you be able to pinpoint the date you sent that?
I didn't see it either.
Okay, Roger, fire
Hey,
away.
Okay, well, I think what happens is that with the pergola, we had intended to use the screw type helical piles, which make almost no effect on the ground. There's no excavation. They're just actually driven down in. They have about 4,000 pounds per unit. So you'd have 16 pounds of total, 16,000 pounds of total compaction on those four pieces. And those four pieces hold up the beams that connect the two structures together. But what that did was to keep the floodplain line, because of the slope, the direction of the new garage is just slightly different than the direction of the existing garage. It kept any of the excavation for foundations out of the floodplain. What the floodplain actually goes out of the front left of the existing garage and goes into the new building about 6 feet at the right side. So it then just goes out, that contour goes out on the left face of the existing garage. So by using the pergola and by using the helical piles, we make no effect in that floodplain area. The change that we made, Woody, is sort of in response to some of the questions that I think it was perhaps called a sham connection, but that was one of the reasons that it was set up that way. What happened when we drew the new plan, which connected the two buildings, meant that there would be absolutely no change to the driveway that abuts the Otterson driveway, so that you can actually back out of the garage into that existing gravel stone driveway area, which if you look at the new plan, you can see how it goes back almost to the property line.
Mhm.
And that would save any changes in the driveway surface itself. And I think as we began to look at all that, we thought that because the front face of the new garage was slightly further back, it also opened the visual as you're driving in the driveway from the left rear corner of the house.
How much of this construction is in the floodplain, though?
Well, in this particular case, it would be from 6 feet to 0 across the face of the existing garage, so that you'd have about 6 feet of foundation in the floodplain. And of course, it's a slab on grade, as it being a garage, so that there's no foundation involved except for that 6 feet on the right side rear of the connector.
So can you tell me how many square feet are going to be affected here?
So the original garage, I think, as we calculated, it had 416 square feet in the sideline setback. When I spoke to you on the last meeting, I calculated that the new building would have been 480 square feet. Now, because it's been moved back and it's slightly further away from the sideline, or less incursion into the setback, that 480 has reduced down to 460 square feet.
Yeah, I'm not concerned about the setback right now. What I'd like to know is how many square feet of floodplain are going to be affected by the new design?
Oh, okay. So it's basically 6 down to 0, and it's almost in a diagonal line, and it is 17 feet. So I would say that it's about half of that. So 17 times 3 would be 51 square feet.
And I assume it's all zone A?
Yes. As I say, it is a slab on grade, and so it's really no effect in terms of a crawl space or basement below.
Is it going to have vents for water flow?
Yes, the vents would be in that, there are two doors shown in that niche that's on the house side. There are two doors in there.
Which drawing is that?
That is on, well, it's shown in the plan on A25. There's a door that's in the existing single-car garage and workshop, and there's also a door that goes into the new garage. And both those doors would have flood vents.
So what kind of relief would this require, Adam, if we didn't go the de minimis route?
So what I might propose doing is ask for a further continuance. We would amend our application to also include relief for a special permit within the floodplain district. I'd work with Ms. Oram to re-advertise to make sure that we gave the abutters notice that we're seeking that additional relief.
Okay, well, not ready to cut it off right yet, but let me turn it over to Matt. You drafted a decision, which was
No, we
very good, I
didn't.
must say.
David did.
No, I didn't do it.
What?
That wasn't me.
It was David.
David, very good. All right. Well, Dave, then why don't you dug into this as deeply as anybody on the board. What's your feeling on this?
Well, my only issue with the pergola was raising the question of whether it was an artifice to avoid a variance or an important part of the structure. And my thinking on that is essentially that avoiding encroachment on the floodplain is a good consideration and a good reason to use a pergola. So I really had no significant issue myself with the pergola design. This design, 51 square feet of zone A with flood vents. I would think that it's pretty de minimis. But it's not, the issue is it's not in the application. And I don't know if do we have the authority to just add a section to the application and deliberate and decide on it without notice?
Well, it feels to, I don't know. I mean, I think because it's floodplain, it deserves a new notice, new hearing, but
And it does require a little more detailed drawing for us to see just where the encroachment is. So.
If I might, I really like not having to address the question of the pergola, because to me, it did feel like an artifice. And I like the design better the way it is. And I have a feeling that we probably wouldn't have floodplain issues if it's designed properly with such a small amount of footprint. Not that I wanted to deliberate that now, but I don't see how we don't require them to bring it up properly before us. So I think Mr. Brodsky's suggestion is a really good one.
meaning a re-advertisement. Sorry, Charlie.
Yeah. I mean, I got a feeling we're not going to have a problem with it, but I think that's the right way to do it.
It's a different kind of relief.
It's a different kind of, and it's still an 8.7 because they are building in the setback.
Right.
I think we might very well find that it's not detrimental and that there's not a problem.
Yeah, but it may require.
But it's two issues, and I like his thought process.
Yeah, it may require Section 9 approval as well. Charlie?
I was saying I totally agree with Peter, and I thought Adam Brodsky's solution was excellent.
I'm not sure that the information would be helpful, but the total new garage is 684 square feet. So that the 51 square feet in the back that would actually be in that floodplain is, less than 10% of the total square footage of that section of the building.
Mm-hmm. Lee, where are you on this? I can't, you're muted. It's. Whoop. All right.
There I am. No, I'm fine. I agree with everybody that there should be notice because it's in the floodplain.
Have we heard from anybody? Well, I'll turn it over to others, any other interested parties, but anybody else on the board want us to weigh in?
No, I think I'm in agreement with the resubmittal. I think personally, yeah, my consideration was more on like the extension of the existing nonconformity versus the pergola versus not. But I think it's fair to separate them and put them in front of us.
Okay. So are there other people here who'd like to, speak for or against the idea of refiling? Or
So, Mr. Chittick, just to be clear, I'm not suggesting that we refile,
Yeah,
but we'll continue. I'll request an
you're going to amend
the application, adding the additional relief that we're seeking, and then we can notify butters and also publish so that
Yeah, I
on
misspoke.
January 5th, you'll have the whole package in front of you, and that seems to be the reasonable course given the board's concerns.
Anybody else would like to speak?
Would you like a motion to continue?
Yes, please.
I so move. Peter Gerdecker.
Peter Gerg has moved. Second.
I'll second it, Matt Watkins.
Matt Watkins, second. Okay, we'll take a vote. Woody Chidick, aye.
Lee Darst, aye.
Carl Higginson, aye.
Matt Watkins, aye.
Dave?
Morris, aye.
Okay,
Peter Gerdecker, aye.
so it's unanimous. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I may just interject for just two items. First, before we go on, I just wanted to mention that our new Director of Planning, Permits and Inspections and Building Inspector is actually attending the meeting. Is maybe on the bottom of your screen. His name is John Hallen, if John wants to give a wave, but I wanted you all to know that he is here.
Oh, nice.
Listening to all the fun. You're on mute, John.
John, at the end of this, assuming we move our way through our agenda efficiently, would you have a few minutes just to talk to us about your background and, how you might approach this position, et cetera, et cetera?
Sure. We could be around for that.
Yeah, it's impromptu, it's informal, just, it'd be nice to chat for a couple of minutes.
Sure.
Right.
So, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Welcome to Mr. Hallen. And I don't know if I'll get the opportunity, but I just want to congratulate Mr. Egan on his semi-retirement. But thank you.
Bob, when does a semi become 100%?
I think he's going to be around to the end of the month.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's going to come in a few days a week and kind of, he's not going cold turkey. So he'll be around for a little bit.
We're not going to let him.
Yeah, I'll be easy to find.
All right, great.
Okay.
Well, of course, there's a lot to be said, but we won't take the time up right now.
Thank you,
You've been
Mr.
part of
Chairman.
this for, what, 30 years, I bet, almost?
31.
31.
Wow.
I could name all the zoning board members that I've dealt with over all the years, but Woody is the constant. He was there at my beginning, and he's there at my end.
Wow.
Sounds ominous, but I don't.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, well, you're not going to go too far.
Aye.
Okay, well, we have two appeals that I would like to act on, really to follow up on our special hearing of a couple of weeks ago. These have to do with 488 Jerusalem Road. And we have a draft vote on both those. Is there any amendment to that draft vote? Or yes, go ahead, Jen.
So I know that at the last hearing, we had asked to come up with language with special counsel, Cindy Amara did. And so I know that you and Cindy will discuss before the board. So I know that was the plan. We do have people on watching for these hearings. I don't know if we're going to just go to the votes as planned, or if you where the hearings are open, if you planned on taking any, any, I don't know.
Yeah, well, I would certainly like to read the draft language and have the board and any interested citizens or abutters to comment on that.
So,
Yeah, Cindy?
I guess my question is, would you prefer to do that before or after closing the hearing?
I would prefer to, well, could we get comments from people after we close the hearing? Not
No.
really.
Not really, because it wouldn't be part of your deliberation.
Yeah,
Right.
so I don't know if how much the board has to, the board probably would be inappropriate for the board to do a lot of deliberation while the hearing's open, but if there are people who would like to comment, once they know what the draft language is, I think that would be a way to do it and probably appropriate.
so I think my question just is if you wish to work on the closing of the hearing now, or if you wish, for instance, the landowner and the Wyndham's, the landowner of 48 and the Wyndham's attorney are in the attendees. I didn't know whether you would want me to bring them forward to speak since they are here, or if we're going to just move forward to do the vote to close the hearing, which at the, which we would do the
Well, I'd
language.
like to hear from, we're not going to be able to hear from them once we close the hearing.
All right.
So I would like to hear from them briefly before we close the hearing.
Okay, so I will promote Jill Maxwell, I'm sorry, and Ryan Stasko and Attorney DeLisi. And John Cavanero.
Oh, goodness, okay. Who would like to proceed first? Jill, why don't you go first?
Proceed first. And if you'd be willing to hear me, I would like to briefly address this issue with the recent construction of the bump out, if that's acceptable to Woody. Because I think that there's an issue there that I think the board needs to address relating to relating to all of this, really.
You mean that you might take issue with what has been constructed since our last hearing?
That's correct. That's correct. And again, just not having proper data so that we know what's being constructed. It's like we're going full circle here.
Well, I think, the way we left it at the last hearing was they had limited flexibility to proceed. And back where you're probably talking about winterizing, but that was about it. And it was caveat emptor. If they went too far, too fast, that was their lookout. We would not be swayed in the least. And I don't think anything's changed. I think, let me ask Bob. Bob, have they ceased construction beyond what we authorized or not?
Yeah, I think there was a mix-up at the very beginning, and they took down some of the bump out and started, reconstruction what had been there previously. And after a discussion with Mr. DeLisi and Mr. Stasko, the course of action was to stop all work on that bump out until the whole matter is resolved. But I think that.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, but I think he, Mr. Stasko, tried to demonstrate that is a duplication of what had previously existed. And,
but because it wasn't permitted, it will come up before us again.
Well, in that it was part of the original structure that had been torn down and rebuilt.
Well, he can demonstrate that, and if we're satisfied.
So my concern is that at the last hearing, you all obviously issued your order on the appeal relating to the cease and desist order. And you were very specific in deciding that Mr. Stasko wasn't allowed to build beyond the parameters of the 2018 special permit or beyond the parameters of 8.9. So here we are, whatever the mix-up was, what essentially happened was Mr. Stasko took down the 2-story bump out, which we appreciate. Okay, but then what he did is he went back in, apparently trying to comply with 8.9 to reconstruct the original bump out. which again, we appreciate again that he took down the 2 stories, but now what he's done is he's proceeded with work in this area. At the time that Mr. Egan told him to stop, I understand that he continued. I have photographs, and I know we don't want to get into like the deep here, but I have photographs showing that he's continued to construct that area. And my biggest issue is that we again lack the pre and post architectural measurements along with reference to their grade plane to show if whether or not the vertical is the same as it was on the original structure. So I feel like we just keep, no pun intended, but digging deeper holes here, and we keep moving forward before we actually get it right and get all the information in front of us. And I understand this is all at his peril, but at some point it just needs to stop, because I don't think, and again, I have photos that I could show you, but I don't think that Mr. Stasko has stopped. I think that it looks very different than it looked when we were here at the last.
I think there'll be a time and a place to deal with that. We're not going to be swayed by whatever actions he's taken in the last, period of time. I mean, we're going to look at it from a blank slate standpoint.
That's fine, but I think I understand. I think the ambiguity here is Mr. Stasko is taking it upon himself to construct within what he sees as the confines of 8.9, and we don't have the proper plans to show us whether or not that's accurate. If it's accurate, then he's allowed to do it per your last order. But
I understand, and if he wishes to reapply or to apply for additional relief, which I suspect he will, we'll all have an opportunity to look at plans and look at as best we can reconstruct a prior look at this. But we're not going to we're not going to decide it tonight. And
no, I just think that we need to be consistent with what you decided last time and not.
Well, we are trying.
Right. No, I know you are, and I very much appreciate that. I just am frustrated that we seem to be going in circles, notwithstanding your efforts to put an order in place to hopefully prevent this from happening.
Well, he's either building within the provisions of 8.9 or he's not. And if he's not, he's going to have a problem down the road. And if he is, then he's not going to have a problem down the road. But I think you are correct that we need to see the plans of what was there before and what's going up. But that's not for now. That's for later.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So would you, as far as there's 2 appeals remaining that the board is, I understand you've crafted motions for tonight. Our position is as follows. On appeal number, I'll call it appeal number 1, which was our July 22nd, 2020 appeal of the issuance of the June 25th, 2020 building permit. It's our position that this board should reverse the building commissioner's issuance of that building permit and require Mr. Stasko to comply with the associated July 1st, 2020 letter from Mr. Egan, which in other words, for Mr. Stasko to A, comply with the 2018 special permit, and B, comply with section 8.9, and anything outside of the parameters of those decisions, those permits, Mr. Stasko needs to apply for separate relief. So that's appeal number 1. Appeal number 2 relates to Mr. Stasko's appeal of Mr. Egan's July 1st, 2020 decision. It's our position that that appeal should be denied, and it does seem at this point that perhaps Mr. Stasko has abandoned the construction of the 2-story bump out on the southeast corner of the property. It's our position that that should still be denied, because it's our position it should never, that should never be permitted in the first place. And so that's the Wyndham's position at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Jeff, do you have comments to make? You're not obligated, obviously.
Yeah, no, I just in brief, I disagree with the Wyndham's attorney's characterization that we're going backwards, and I recognize that we'll have an opportunity to demonstrate that in the future. And we do, as indicated previously, intend to make application for any differences between 8.9 and the special permit that was issued back in 2000?
2018, yeah.
Additionally, just for the record, we're not abandoning anything. We fully expect that you would make a determination on our appeal, which we filed, and it sounds like you're intending to do that. So that's it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, board, any questions? That are not deliberating, but otherwise I would propose that we close each hearing in turn.
A motion?
Yeah.
Second.
Okay, a motion to close the hearing on appeal number 20.07.23. That's filed by the Wyndhams to close that hearing on appeal.
Second. Oh, no, we already seconded it. Okay, sorry.
Okay, all in favor, Woody Chidick, aye.
Lee Darst, aye.
Charlie Higginson, aye.
Charlie?
Matt
Peter
Watkins,
Gertica, aye.
Okay. Matt and Dave.
Dave McMorris, aye.
Matt Watkins, aye.
Okay, so that carries unanimously 6-0. Appeal number 2, which is filed by Attorney Jeff DeLisi on behalf of his client Ryan Stasko. I'd make a motion to close that hearing. That's appeal number 20.07.29. I've
Dave
made the
McMorris,
motion.
second.
Okay, made and seconded. All in favor, Woody Chidick, aye.
Lee Darst, aye.
Charlie Higginson, aye.
Charlie?
Dave McMorris, aye.
Dave?
Matt Watkins, aye.
Matt and?
Peter Gertica, aye.
Peter. Okay, great. Okay, so we will deliberate that in a bit, but we have 2 more hearings that are continued. Would like to deal with them both, if we may. The first of which is 62 Rust Way, filed by Cavanaro Consulting on behalf of its clients, Thomas and Eileen Norton, to construct an addition in the rear setback. They're seeking a special permit, 8.7B. And who is here to speak? John, are you here to speak on behalf of that application?
Good evening, members
Yep.
of the board. Thank you for hearing us again this evening. I just want to circle back on what we submitted since the last hearing. We were asked to take a harder look at the neighborhood with respect to the size and scope of dwellings within the vicinity of the Norton's home. And we also looked at some additional topography. It was asked of us to take a look at the surrounding grading offsite to see how that matched with the locust property. So we added some more detail to the site plan, and we put together some neighborhood comparisons for the living area, lot size, and overall percentage of house with respect to lot.
Okay, questions of the
We
board?
would ask,
Sorry. No, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry, did you have more to?
well, I would just say, I know at the last hearing, there was some question as to whether or not, the scope of this project was within the confines of a typical relief. So I just want to be clear that before closing the hearing, if there was a situation where we were looking at something that we couldn't come back from, that we'd want the ability to withdraw or to make revisions to make any differences on the board's opinion. So I just this isn't a project where a developer's coming in to try to build as much as he can. This is the Norton's home. So, if this is something that needs to be revisited, we just want that opportunity if the board would be so gracious.
And I think the device, if you feel that you may be denied, you would like the opportunity to withdraw without prejudice.
Correct.
Enabling you to modify probably both the plan and the type of relief you need. Is that a fair statement of what?
Yes.
Well, I have a
Because-
question, Woody.
Sure.
If they were to be denied on this plan, would they be able to come back with a substantially different plan and not have, sort of the prejudicial question? I would think so, right?
You mean withdraw?
No, if they didn't withdraw, but were to be denied, but they were denied for this plan as opposed to some other potential plan that
That
they
isn't
might-
repetitive.
Yeah,
It's
that
different.
isn't repetitive. Yes, substantially different. They still have the right to come forth with another plan, correct?
Well, let me, go ahead, Jen.
They do, but it's a two-step process. They would have to first go to the planning board and get a vote to say that it was a substantially different application, and then it would come back. I believe it's this is section 6, Cindy, or section 16 of 40A. It's a dual process to do so, just so you know.
Cindy's muted, so it's a little hard to tell if.
I have this going on in another municipality, and I don't remember off the top of my head if it's 6 or 16, but that is a two-step process. And then the question becomes also fees.
Yeah, I'm just wondering what the advantage would be for the applicant, not so much for this board, but the applicant to either, go through that two-step process and make the case that this is not a repetitive petition, or just allow the applicant here to withdraw without prejudice if.
Well, it seems to me that the one piece of information they would get if they were to be denied would be the board's thinking, which might guide them in how they came back with a different plan. Now, if it's a two-step process and more expensive and whatever, maybe that's not worth much, but maybe it is, rather than coming back with something that was much more incremental because they were not denied, if they just withdrew. So they get information one way or the other, but they get different information.
My question is, how does this work? I mean, do we close the hearing and then deliberate, and then before we vote, they decide whether or not they want to withdraw?
It's before any decision is rendered, isn't that the language? So
We can deliberate, but
Right.
not decide.
right, and then they can withdraw at the last minute.
Okay.
Okay.
I mean, Cindy, do you have a recommendation from the town council perspective, as opposed to what would be best or easiest for the applicant?
I don't know that I can answer that question representing the town on behalf of the applicant, but
No, I'm not saying don't represent representing the town, regardless of what the applicant may wish, which is better for us procedurally.
I don't think it really makes much difference procedurally to the town, because either way, you're going to have a new plan before you to deliberate on and evaluate on its own. I think there's a lot of times when, if the decision hasn't been rendered, it's more common to have a withdrawal than to have a repetitive petition. I've mostly seen repetitive petitions come up when there's been a decision that the applicant doesn't like, but I'll defer to John Cavanaro as to what his position or his client's position may be, just to hear their position.
Yeah.
Our major concern is the actual nature of the lot, the location of the dwelling, the position of the house on the lot, that there's not a lot that we could do and keep the addition in the general location and be substantially different with a new application that would be substantially different, I guess. What we'd appreciate if there was something that was major that we could even consider for a redesign and continue the hearing and come back with something. If that's not possible, then I suppose waiting for a deliberation and going to that degree.
Well, we haven't closed the hearing. I mean, so that's an option.
So that's certainly something that we would appreciate.
Dave, what do you think?
Well, I think that this particular project is one that could benefit all of us by having some actual discussion and deliberation. Because there are some issues about what's, what do we mean when we talk about detrimental to the neighborhood, et cetera, that come up with, in this particular project, very differently than it comes up in other projects. But it's, it's up to the applicant what they want to do.
Right. Well, I fear that closing the hearing would not be the best, in our best interest. If there was an opportunity that we could even go back to the drawing board and come back with something and then make that decision, if that was the case. So
Matt, what's your point of view? Charlie Higginson, Lee?
Yeah, I mean, I was just looking back. I know we gave some feedback or some concern in the last meeting about some different components of it. I don't know how much more we could get into that without officially deliberating. I do recall one case that was in front of us where, we had to determine if it was significantly different of a plan in order for it to go to, the next submittal. My only concern with the, deliberation and then the withdrawal prior to the roll call is, you could have that with a lot of cases moving forward, right? If we have a percentage of increase within the facade that we're not comfortable with and it's talked about, but then it looks like it's going to be denied, but it was denied without prejudice and then brought back a couple weeks later at 10% less, does it make it any more? Or, you know what I mean? I don't know that would be the best practice to allow for the withdrawal once they realize that it's trending that way. I'm just gonna maybe look back at my notes and see if there's any of those elements that I know this board has given some constructive feedback on some of those components in the past before officially deliberating, but I think we gave, probably as much of that as we could at the last meeting,
Right. Well, if it would be okay with the board, if you could allow us to continue,
Sure.
we would appreciate that.
Sure, it's a special permit, so I think we're okay. Anybody on the board object to continuing the hearing? Lee, you okay with that? Charlie?
Yes.
Okay, I'd make a motion that we continue this hearing until January, 5th? Our next hearing? Do I have a second, Pete?
Second.
And all in favor, Woody Chitik, aye.
Lee Darcey.
Charles Higginson, aye.
Thank you.
Dave McMorris, aye.
Okay, so I
Peter
think
Gerdekai.
that's a 6-0 unanimous to continue this hearing until January 5th. And the last continuation continued for 6 months or 7 months or 8 months is 124 and 187 Elm Street. Attorney Brodsky, I presume, is going to be representing the principals. And while we've had this application, the form, I think since March, we haven't, discussed anything. And I don't know, maybe you could start off by giving us the overview in terms of where you are. My understanding is you're still before the planning board. I'll let you tell me, whether or not you've been to the, I don't know if you've been to the Concom, but are the plans pretty well set, or are they still in flux?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe that George McGoldrick and Ted Lubitz are also here, and I'd ask that Ms. Oram promote them to be panelists so that they can participate. And good evening, everyone. I represent the applicant Chai Elm Street Realty LLC. And as I mentioned, Mr. McGoldrick and Mr. Lubitz are managers. John Cavanaro is our professional engineer, and he's also with us this evening. And I should say thank you very much for the board's patience. We have been lurking on your agenda for many months, but the reason we didn't want to present when we filed originally was that we were going through the planning board process. And as a result of that process, the project has been modified, and we're prepared this evening to present to the board the modified project for your consideration. So if that's acceptable, we'd like to proceed, Mr. Chittick.
Sure, and also deal with the relief that you're requesting if it has changed to any degree over what you originally proposed.
No, thank you. And so we're here before you for a special permit under section 309.6 for our mixed-use project, which is located within the town's floodplain and watershed protection district. The relief that we're seeking has not changed over this period of time. And so what I'd quickly like to do is simply set the stage and hand the matter over for John to walk through the site plans. But as you likely know, the project consists of two separate parcels, 124 Elm Street and 87 Elm Street. 124 Elm Street is the location presently of the Cohasset Harbor Inn. That property is located within the Waterfront Business District and the Harbor Village Business Overlay District. The property is also located within the FEMA AE elevation flood zone and therefore within your floodplain district, which is why we're in front of you seeking relief. The other property is 87 Elm Street across the way, which is improved with an existing residential and commercial mixed-use building. That property is actually located in the downtown business district and the HVBOD district, and is located within the FEMA zone AE, but it's elevation 9, and therefore also needs relief because it's located within the floodplain district. And as John is going to explain in more detail, we're proposing 2 3-story mixed-use buildings at 124 Elm Street and 1 2-story mixed-use building at 87 Elm Street. And as John will explain in more detail, the project is designed to comply with the building code flood-resistant construction requirements with all habitable space located above the base flood elevation. And so in addition to the special permit that we require from the Zoning Board of Appeals, we require an HVBOD special permit and site plan review approval from the Planning Board. The Planning Board is actually the special permit granting authority within the overlay district. We will require an order of conditions from the Conservation Commission. We're in the process of putting together that notice of intent, but again, we needed to get through the Planning Board process in order to make sure that we had a consistent design in order to do that. We'll also need a Chapter 91 license from the Department of Environmental Protection because a portion of 124 is located within jurisdictional tidelands, which are governed under the Chapter 91 program. As I explained in our original application back in April, the project meets your standards for the issuance of a special permit within the floodplain district. And with that, I'll turn it over to John, please.
Thank you, Adam. And I will plan to share my screen, if that's okay, to walk through the plan set. I'm going to go right to the existing conditions and the proposed conditions. But as Adam mentioned, this property is included in a couple of different zoning districts and multiple Zone A floodplain districts. So in the intersection of Elm Street and Margin Street and border at the bottom of the page, 124 Elm is the existing Cohasset Harbor Inn facility. Long, narrow building that falls very close to the edge of the harbor. It crosses the FEMA flood line, which goes from an A11 to an A10, and then it slopes down from an A10 down to an AE9, which includes the entire property at 87 Elm. So back to 124, we have a property that is slightly slopes up to the back of the existing building. This is all below the flood elevation. The entire property on the water side is all below the flood elevation, as well as the remainder of the property all the way back until we get over to Margin Street where the grade starts to come up above elevation 10, which is right here. So this is the small portion that's outside of the floodplain on this property, but it's all mapped to be located within it. Across the street, we have a lowering grade. It gently rolls from elevation 9 in the parking lot of 124 down to below elevation 3 at the back corner, the southwesterly corner of 87 Elm Street. So the existing 124 Elm Street property is non-flood compliant in many ways. One, it actually has a basement. 2, there are no flood openings within the building itself. It has adjacent grades that are below the flood elevation. The first floor is elevated above the base flood elevation. The parking lot is all below the base flood elevation. Right now, the grade comes up from the seawall and it runs up against the building at around contour, a little above contour 10. Both properties are non-conforming with respect to zoning beyond just the floodplain. They're too small. Their buildings are too close to the lot line, and they exceed lot coverage. What's being proposed, I'm going to skip over the parking diagram and go to the site plan. Essentially, just to roll back a little bit, because you did get an original application that had a different package in front of you. And what that really the biggest difference was that original application had below grade parking. It had below grade parking and it had essentially a lower first floor elevation for some of the habitable space. It still would have been flood compliant, but it would have been in lower. So the biggest change was actually to reduce the overall unit count, to reduce the building size, and to elevate the parking at 124 Elm. So what we essentially did was we made the project a little bit more sustainable as it relates to potential climate change and rising seas, to get that elevated parking up at about the grade that the existing parking lot is today, but it will be covered like the original application, and the building will be flood compliant with respect to having the ability to withstand the flood by allowing floodwaters to pass through the garage. They won't be as low, so there won't be the need for any pumps. They'll be elevated so that they would be able to drain in and out when the flood passed. But the other substantial benefit, really the change from with this proposed development, is that we're pulling a large portion of the building back from the seawall. So we're opening up actually a large area that actually increases the amount of flood storage on the property, on both properties too. I'll get to 87 Elm in a minute. But right now, as I mentioned, the existing plan, the grade slopes up fairly steeply, and then it stays around contour 10, where we're actually pulling the contour 10 back into the property quite a bit, almost where the existing building is. And that ends up being all additional flood storage. In fact, on this side of the line, on the water side, the east side of this FEMA designated line, this is comes up to floods up to elevation 10. I'm sorry, 11, and it's 10 on the westerly side. So we pick up actually a fair bit of additional storage just by eliminating the building and regrading this area, opening this up as public space. The building itself will again be flood compliant with respect to allowing the flood waters to pass through. The building will be designed with flood openings that will enable the building to withstand the hydrostatic pressure. All the utilities will be elevated above the base flood elevation, so there'll be no utilities located below that. At 87 Elm, we're actually also lowering the elevation slightly within the parking area, which in turn also increases flood capacity. This building will also function as flood compliant with respect to being able to allow the flood to come in to the building and then pass out through the building. This entire lot is below the base flood elevation of 9. All of the proposed amenities, the living space, the principal use on both properties will all be elevated above the base flood elevation. In fact, they'll be 1 foot above the base flood elevation in accordance with the building code. So with respect to additional environmental compliance, as Adam mentioned, we'll be filing with the Cohasset Conservation Commission for a notice of intent. We'll be filing for a Chapter 91 license with the Mass DEP. And with that also comes environmental compatibility and regulations that this project has been designed to meet and exceed in many cases. But really the big, I think, benefit from a flood compliance standpoint is the fact that we're increasing the amount of flood storage at both properties, and we're putting in buildings that will be flood compliant to withstand that 100-year flood. Happy to answer any questions, or I'm not sure if George wanted to add anything to the end.
Well, he may want to add after the board has had a chance to ask some questions, I guess, or respond. I mean, we're certainly not going to give him all the time he needs. Who wants to go first on the board? Questions?
I think it would be helpful to see the elevations at this time to be able to put the site plan into perspective. We don't need to have a lot of discussion unless the applicants want to go through things. But since this is a new plan over the materials we had before, I think that would be useful.
Elevations as they relate to the ground, Peter, or the building elevations?
Actually, both, because the building elevations are going to tell us a bit about flood compliance, I think. But the ground in specific, to the extent that it's possible, so that we get a sense perhaps for the topography as it will be modified.
Okay. So I can blow these up a little bit. Would you like to walk through the existing site plan and then switch over?
No, I'm not too concerned about the existing site plan. I've had to look at it for 45 years. I'm kind of more interested in what you would like to do.
Yeah.
So perhaps the schematics as well would give a good perspective.
If you had them, that would be good.
So schematics from the architectural plan set, George?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So schematics, not elevations, back down to the schematic right here.
Right there, correct. Yep.
You want to start with the first one and work our way down?
Yes.
Okay. George, would you like to speak to any of these, or would you like me to walk through the board with respect to their position?
You're getting paid. You might as well speak.
Okay. So we're standing at the intersection of Margin and Elm, with sort of the green triangle Cove. I guess it's referred to as Cove Street, with Elm Street addresses. So this is looking towards the harbor. This is an important feature of the project because this was something that was part of the harbor study to create a view corridor. Right now, the existing building sort of passes through this and occupies a lot of this view corridor. With respect to the flood compliance, so these are elevations. They don't have all the engineering details that will be included in a final set of plans, but essentially there will be flood openings. These are these are facades to disguise and to beautify essentially the at-grade parking. But these will have flood openings in them around.
John, how high is the parking field the parking garage inside there? Is it more or less at the grade of the street, or
Yes.
is it elevated up some? I see stairs on the building to the left side there.
Right.
But is the parking down flush with the present street grade?
It is. I'm going to take us back to the site plan here.
Yep.
So you can see that the residential access is also on Margin Street here. So these are the stairs that you see. So the parking itself is below that at elevation 9. So these grades are actually above the floodplain.
Yeah.
This comes down, so you'll start to see openings in this part of the building in here.
Okay.
And this is actually open air connecting the two buildings. And this is all at or below the flood elevation. And this, the ground itself, and then the garage slab is below that. So right now, the existing grade, which will remain, is about elevation 8 as you enter the parking area. And then this will slope up to elevation 9 and pretty much stay at 9 plus or minus for the entire parking area. All of the living space, and you see these little stairs that go up to the elevators. So the mechanicals will be elevated above the ground floor parking. And the ground itself is elevated above. So the openings will be in the door and all these walls and here. And then this will have openings throughout here. From the ocean side, if you recall that the 10 contour is going up back to the existing, I know you're familiar with it, but just it gives a little perspective. This is the 10 contour as it comes in to the building. The slopes down, but the 10 wraps around pretty much the back of the building here. And it sort of goes straight to the parking lot. Whereas in the proposed plan, we still pick up the 10, but it comes further into the site, back well off the seawall. We're actually pulling the 9 contour back as well. So this all stays low at its existing elevation to marry into the existing road. All the road network will remain at the same elevation. Over at 87, this also stays at the same elevation, and this slopes down to a ramp, and then this levels off to a lower elevation at around contour 3. So this will have openings all along the back side in here. This will all be flood openings.
So the garage slab there is more or less at 3.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, that's at about the low end of the existing parking lot. It's about 3.5. So going back to the perspectives, I can just walk through these. Obviously, looking at it from the Veterans Memorial, these are the 2 garage openings that you see on the back side. Where the curb cut is, this is the existing memorial to remain as is. This is the parking lot behind the memorial. And this is the new public space that will be created by pulling the building back off of the harbor. Here's a look. Again, these are perspective. Some of these design elements have been modified, but the concept remains that there'll be a harbor walk adjacent to the seawall. There'll be an open area here with elevated non-residential space that protrudes out of this north building. And this will be landscaped, sloped up to meet a new sidewalk that will wrap around and make its way down towards the town pier. This makes its way, which doesn't exist today, obviously, over to the Veterans Memorial. This is a look at 87 Elm from that Elm Street Cove intersection. And this is a look at the entrance to the garage that slopes down underneath this building. So all of this structure is elevated a foot above the base flood elevation for the non-residential space. And then the residential space is elevated above that. So hopefully those provide some more perspective to the project.
Okay, board members, who wants to go next? Okay, shy group. Does anyone want to go, have any questions of the applicant at this point?
If I have a follow-up.
Sure, keep going.
I wonder whether the next set of plans will actually show where the various openings will be.
So the construction plan certainly will. Would you like to see a diagram that cites all of the flood openings?
You know, I mean, our purview here is pretty limited, but it's pretty specific too. And I don't think it needs to be elaborate, but it might be helpful. You ran your pointer along the facades where there would be openings. I think it might help us to understand sort of the number and width. I don't plan to be an engineer on this, but you know, this project is right on the water, and in a big storm event, it's fairly protected water, but it's right there, and it would be kind of nice to feel comfortable that the sea can roll through. So,
Mr. Godeke, it's Adam Brodsky. We're obviously going to need to submit construction plans that demonstrate compliance with the building code.
Sure.
And those plans would obviously have all of the detailed flood openings. And I don't know if it would be appropriate that, you know, as a condition of your approval, that you require that, but we're going to need that information anyway in order to secure building permits.
well, yeah, and construction contracts and everything else, but no, I'm certainly familiar with that. If there were a quick and dirty way to indicate the openings, it'd be great. And if there isn't, there isn't. So I understand the difference between schematics and construction drawings. I see them every day.
I think it's certainly feasible to have some calculations as far as the relationship with the amount of building versus the amount of flood opening. So
Yeah.
that's a calculation that needs to be done.
Okay.
The other board members.
I just wanted to comment. I agree with Peter. Our purview here is pretty limited, but as Peter said, pretty specific. So the more directed and focused the information to us is related to what we have to look at, the better off we are.
John, maybe you or Adam could speak to the kind of relief you need. I mean, you've requested 9.6, which says that you need a special permit. But from a specific use standpoint, we basically then segue over to 9.7. And I look at 9.7H, which has those 5 standard tests. And the second test says that if adjacent to tidal waters, which it is, and you talked about it flooding, the proposed structure is not less than 10 feet above mean sea level. How do you qualify, or how do you meet that need? And is that the appropriate section under 9.7 for use, or should we look elsewhere?
No, Mr. Chittick, you're correct. We would qualify under 300-9.7H and have to meet all of the requirements of 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, which I addressed in our application. Specifically with respect to section 2, and we've consulted with Mr. Egan regarding this, that we do comply, because that requires essentially compliance with the building code, that our habitable space, our use, is located above the base flood elevation. I do want to point out something, that we're dealing with two different datums. So the FEMA floodplain maps are based upon NAVD 88. Your bylaw speaks to mean sea level, so there has to be an adjustment. And John will correct me, I think 10 mean sea level is roughly 9.8 NAVD 88.
9.2.
Excuse me.
Pretty close, though. I mean, plus or minus less than a foot, you're saying.
Correct. But we've always understood, and the board has applied 9.7H2 to require essentially the use, which is the residential and the commercial use, to be above the habitable space, be above the base.
Well, it doesn't. That's my issue, Adam. It doesn't say habitable space. It says any construction of a building or structure. A structure is the parking lot itself, or the slab on grade, is right. Filling. They may be filling, changing grade.
So we don't believe that the bylaw is intended to regulate the parking areas as structures. And I do agree that the bylaw is less than clear, but that's how we understand that it's always been applied. Essentially, it doesn't prohibit the construction of buildings below 10 mean sea level.
No, it doesn't.
It requires that your use be above 10 mean sea level. In this case, we're a foot above the base flood elevation, which is required by the state building code.
I won't kill it with words right now, but my concern is that if this floods and the marsh area, Jacobs Meadow floods, I mean, I abut it, and I have a daughter who abuts it, and we notice it floods a lot. Cars parked at the 3-foot elevation, I think, would have to vacate during those events.
That's true.
I mean, and so where do they, parking is at a premium. I mean, do you have a backup plan or a fallback situation where temporarily cars could go elsewhere or not? It's something I think we have to think about seriously here, because this area may not have changed topographically a lot, but its use is going to be intensified for good, not for evil. I mean, I'm glad to see this, being a vibrant part of the town, but there are going to be a lot more cars here and a lot more cars parked than have ever existed before. And do you have a plan?
So we're happy to present you with some information. That's something of an operational issue that would be really the purview of the homeowners association, which would operate certainly the residential units, but we certainly can put some thought into it and provide you with some additional information. But you are correct. In storm events, people are going to have to relocate their cars just like they have to do so presently.
Yeah, it's just there are going to be a lot more cars tomorrow than there were yesterday, if you will, on this site or in this area. And I think that's good news from the standpoint of your clients, but
well, there'll be less transient.
I'm putting on the table.
There'll be less transient cars. I mean, if you had
during a storm,
a wedding during a storm at the former inn, or a wedding up the street, and people staying there, that parking lot full. I don't know what it holds presently, but it holds more than are going to be parking for this.
Yeah, and I guess, Pete, I'm thinking more at the back.
You thinking about 87 rather than
where you go right down to James Brook or the riprap that's a couple of feet above. I mean, you can just. I happened to be walking by there yesterday. I mean, you can see where it's flooded in the not too distant past by looking at the deposits of sand in that.
Yeah.
You know, it looks like the yacht club parking lot. I mean,
It's lower.
lower, yeah. Anyway, that was, you know, we're not closing the hearing tonight, so, but it's something I think you ought to deal with, because we have to deal with the fact that this is going to be a, you know, safe and user-friendly locale. Or, yeah, George.
Mr. Chairman, we have thought about that issue, and we are dealing with the Elm Street Corridor Committee, and they're looking at some redesign of that entire Elm Street. And that's something that we're bringing up with them when we start to meet with them to talk about some redesign of that whole area.
All right. They can come up with a plan, or you guys can come up with an agreeable solution. Anyway, as I say, that's just an issue I have, not a, there may not be an answer sitting here tonight, but how about the other members of the board? I mean, this is a major project in the town. It's for good or for ill, it's going to be an in-your-face project. It's going to be visible to everybody, citizens and tourists alike. I agree with Peter. We all know our jurisdiction is very limited. But once we get our oar in the water, is there anything else that we can probe on, push on, suggest? I'm deafened. Charlie, do you have any points of view? I see your hand moving, so.
I'm worried about the overall height. Now, we aren't really responsible for that, but it's all of them say 35 feet is the maximum height of the building. And from the buildings that I see, they meet that, but they go up beyond that because of chimneys and air conditioners and everything up there. I'm not sure that a half of the roof line is the correct measurement of the upper height of the structures.
Who wants to speak to that on behalf of the applicants?
So, Mr. Higginson, I'm going to defer to John Kavanaugh, but that is an issue that we've discussed at some length with the planning board. And I recognize it's not the subject of this particular hearing, but we're happy to answer that question. The design complies in all respects with the building height requirements within the overlay district, which, as you correctly indicated, is measured 35 feet above base flood elevation. And these are sloped roofs. And so we've measured the roofs in accordance with those requirements. But let me turn it over to John for a more technical answer to that question.
That's fine. I mean, you essentially covered it in that, yes, this is different from other sites in that we're not designing the datum is not from measuring height, an average grade, it's the base flood elevation. So it's 35 feet above the base flood elevation is the height calculation. These are sloped roofs that are measured to the midpoint of the highest sloped roof. And there are chimneys and HVAC units on top of these roofs. That has been looked at with respect to its maximum footprint. And it is allowable. We can have up to 5% of the roof, no more than 5% of the roof covered, and units that exceed the maximum allowable height. So that has been looked at. That calculation is something that will be available to the planning board as also part of the building permit application as required. But it's essentially, it's by right. The building has been designed to meet the height conformance.
George?
So in addition, if you look at the existing structure that's there now, which has got that long mansard roof, the new buildings will be actually slightly less than if you look at the buildings today. You can see the HVAC equipment above it, we're about a foot below what that HVAC equipment is. But the difference is our building will have sloped roofs. They will not be as large as the existing building. There'll be more openings, and they'll be set back after the second floor per the code. So we did spend a significant amount of time. Let's not forget, it was over 2 years ago that the town passed the bylaw to allow this. And then we spent a good year and a half designing something that would meet all the current criteria, as well as be resilient to climate change for the next 50 plus years. So we spent a good year and a half designing this and applied back in April to the planning board. So there was significant concentration on making sure this is resilient to climate change and making sure it fit within all the existing zoning. And as another example of the height, if you look across the street to the north, we're actually shorter than the 4 Margin Street condominium project that's existing there today. We've also put up something there in the building now so that all the neighbors and abutters can go see exactly where the new height is. And I've never been involved in a project where we've had 100% of the abutters pushing us actually faster than we've been able to go to get a project done. So they've all seen the building, they've all seen the new heights, and we haven't had any resistance from any of the abutters for it.
Okay. Matt, do you have any comments or questions?
No, I don't.
Okay. Lee? Well, Dave?
No, I can see all the work that's been put into this, very carefully done.
Okay, I guess what I'd like to do, I'd suggest to the board that we continue it till our next hearing, in order to have a plan. It need not be the definitive plan, but what you would do when, it's not if, but when floods come and cars have to be moved. I know you have property over in Margin Street. That may also be, subject to flooding and useless as a backup option. But if and if you want to deal with the Elm Street group as well to come up with a compatible plan. But in order for us to give a special permit, one of the conditions is that there not be any danger of, we're not creating any pollution or public health hazard, et cetera, under 12.4. And obviously, if there are cars up to their, windows flooded there, yes, the owner of the car suffers immediate penalty, but it also could have some sort of environmental impact. And, I don't know if there's a backup, not a backup plan, but I don't know what the word I'm seeking. It's not a definitive plan, but a conceptual plan that would indicate that, yes, you could handle, cars on some other site or some other locale in the event of a flood when you have to move them. I mean, the owners are not going to want to get flooded out, nor are, the Conservation Commission or anybody else. Now, is that
I think
unrealistic?
No, I think it's fair. As I say, we have looked at it, and I think it's fair to come back with a little more definitive plan for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'd like to see a solution as opposed to a got you or you can't do it kind of thing. Clearly all problems have solutions.
Correct.
I mean, that's one point of view only. Hey, Charlie?
Point. It's not within our jurisdiction, but a lot has been made of the view up Elm Street towards the harbor, and that you will open it up, which is very true. But then I noticed you put 2 shade trees which will block that view. Have you thought about that?
I think the landscape architect took a little extra design time. The view corridor that's required under the harbor management plan is actually a very small specific area. We're enlarging that by almost 3 times more. And yes, we will not be putting up shade trees, and we'll be working with the planning board and the harbor committee to make that space as the view corridors, in fact, giving easements most likely to the town to ensure that there's a much larger view corridor than what's required.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, if there are no, oh, I'm sorry. Are there people, Jen, are there people here who would like to speak for or against the zoning board's area of jurisdiction?
There's no one with their hands raised and no comments on the Q&A, so we are all set.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion to continue this until January in order to see what contingency plan, I guess for lack of a better term, there can be for parking, particularly on 87. I'm concerned about that because that is low and I know it floods. You know, whether you get a half hour or 2 hours, you know, at a very high flood event over in 124, I don't know, but you know, that whole basin, Jacobs Meadow, it takes a little while to drain out. It's not, you know, it's very constricted. So with that, I would like to make a motion to continue. And is the board with me or disagree with me? If so, let's put it
Yeah, I
on
would
the table
second
now.
that. Matt Watkins, I'd second that motion.
Okay, moved and seconded. Woody Chidick, aye.
Lee Darst, aye.
Lee Darst,
Carl Higginson, aye.
Charlie,
Dave McMorris, aye.
Dave,
Peter Gertica, aye.
Peter. No, Matt, we got your vote? Yes, you seconded it, of course. Okay, so that's continued.
Thank you, everyone, and we will see you in the new year.
Thank
Have
you
a
very
good
much.
holiday season.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Ed.
You too.
Yeah, we're going to be probably the fastest board you get through, I think, possibly.
Well, we have the least say.
Yeah, I know.
We either did a great job or a poor job. I'm not sure yet, but I'm hoping.
Yeah, I'll let you twist and turn a little, Adam.
Thank you.
But okay, so that's that for a continued hearing, and we have a new hearing filed by Cavanaro Consulting on behalf of its client, Louisa Kasdan, to do a garage and a dock at 88 Beach Street, and I'm recusing myself on this one. So Peter, he's disappeared, maybe for a
Nope, not far, just grabbing my notes.
rest break. Okay, Peter, would you take over chairing this particular hearing? I'm going to mute and recuse myself on this one. This is the
All right.
Kasdan hearing.
I will. So, John, are you presenting, and do you have accomplices and clients? Or I see one accomplice here.
Yes,
the other one.
Mr. Teriyaki is here with me this evening. I'm not sure if Louisa is in attendance, but I will assume not unless I see her. So I will begin if that's okay, and I'm going to also share my screen again if that's acceptable. And I'm happy that my mic is holding out. Please let me know if that changes, and
You're loud and clear.
I'll turn it over to John. So 88 Beach Street is a lot that is disconnected off of Beach Street, quite frankly. It's a common right-of-way that serves as a driveway between the Mohawk and I say Barbara Powers' old house, basically mid-span between Main Street, North Main, and
So that went well.
Yeah, no, I think it makes
So-
sense. I mean,
Can you hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear. I feel as if we're also hearing somebody else, perhaps.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So this driveway comes down, and what it does is it creates basically a lot of land that is bisected by this right-of-way. It is referenced as Keene Lane in some periodicals in town. Keene Lane is not an official street. It's not, properties are not addressed to Keene Lane. I'm not sure where Keene Lane came from. Perhaps someone named Keene lived on the street, the right-of-way at some point, owned property. But essentially what this lot is it's a property that has all sides. There's no front or rear property line. And the reason is, if we go to the zoning bylaw and look up front yard. A front yard is essentially measured, includes a front line. And a front line, a lot line front, is the property line dividing a lot from a street. So we simply just don't have a property line that divides the lot from the street. We have a right-of-way that passes through this lot that is on both sides of the right-of-way. It's about 2 acres of land. And it has frontage on Little Harbor on 2 sides. So with that, we had a discussion with Bob about this, sort of went through the maps and agreed that what we have is a lot that has all sides. So
John, could I interrupt for 1 second?
Yes.
Would you just trace with your pointer for the benefit of the board, the lot lines that are not the ocean?
Yes. So I'm gonna, forgive me for.
Back to
for
where,
that.
yeah, that's good. Okay.
Yeah, sorry about that. So the lot lines that are not the ocean are this line in here. This is Paulina Cowan's line.
Yeah.
And that goes down. So that's one.
She's 88A, right?
She's 88A, and 88B is at the end of this right of way.
We know all about that one.
We know all about that one, right? So this lot then also includes the right of way. So it goes down to Little Harbor, down here, and then comes along John Weltman's lot line here, back to Little Harbor. So this is essentially the lot in here, with this right of way that passes through the center of it.
And the red and blue lines that we're being shown in the middle, I can't read the.
Okay, I'll bring those up into focus.
Yeah. I mean, I can on your full drawing, but the board can't while we're watching.
So now we're getting into what we're here for. I wanted to start with that to sort of give us some perspective and some orientation on this lot. This is the main dwelling at 88, sits up high on a knob, and we've got the water back here. We'll talk about the ramp and the platform in a minute. The first thing is we have a detached garage structure that is being reconstructed near the place of an old, actually damaged and subsequently removed garage that sat atop this slab. So this is my side yard setback right in here from the sideline. And these are dimensions in red to the existing structure, 170 feet from the sideline to the main dwelling, and 37.8 feet to the other sideline adjacent to the Cowan property. The proposed dimensions are in blue, and they are 101 feet from this sideline to the proposed corner of the garage and 49.3 feet to the sideline adjacent to the Weltmans. So what's being proposed here is a replacement structure that I'll let John get into the details of the structure itself, but it's essentially a garage with living space above. And it's been sited obviously within the building setbacks, but it also falls within the floodplain. And the floodplain on this location it's an A zone, and it's elevation 11. And that's the flood line in this area. So this, although the structure itself will have a slab elevation above elevation 11, so it'll be flood compliant, there won't be any need for flood openings. There will be some minor grading in this area to match the existing contours. So the 10 contour right now passes through, so that will be lowered slightly. So we'll be lowering the elevation here and bringing that 11 contour up, which essentially will be elevating.
So you'll be at or above 11 with the slab for the new garage.
That's correct.
And so the contour on the other side, so wait a minute. So is 10 the lowest in this locus here?
It
Or does
is,
get-
yeah.
It
'cause
gets,
we wanna-
doesn't get lower, or is this a 9 here? I'm sorry, I'm pointing now and you can't see me pointing.
I know, I
Is-
tend to do that
sorry.
myself.
Is
I'm
there an-
pointing at the 9 contour right here.
Yeah, okay, all
This
right,
is- But we're not changing the 9 contour.
yeah.
Other than removing a portion of the driveway that we're going to reconfigure the driveway so that it marries the proposed structure.
Into the new garage. Okay.
Right. Get rid of this. So that will be removed. So that's essentially the net result of the grading in this area. I'll ask John if you want to talk a little bit about the structure itself, John.
Sure. It's essentially a slab on grade structure that will have this is John Teriyaki Architectural Design. It's going to have a perimeter foundation wall that's going to go down to frost level, and it's not going to have a basement. It'll be slab on grade with the top of the slab at elevation 11.2. It's going to have space for parking of 2 cars and a small entry area with a stair going above. And the above space will be finished space as basically a family guest room type space with a bedroom, bathroom, and a small sitting area. The building itself complies with the building height. I can get into the details of the design of the building, but I'm not sure, that's relevant to the special permit, but I'm happy to share images if the board would like to see them.
Well, I think from my part, since I believe we don't need to consider any relief other than flood on this one.
That's correct.
That isn't necessary. I have had a chance to look at the drawings that were submitted, and it all seems terrific. But does the board want you to? The rest of the board, would you like to see a presentation on the garage structure itself?
We're only here on floodplain.
Right. Well, we got the dock stuff coming too, but
right. But everything's conforming here. It's
yeah,
just the floodplain issue. So
I guess there's only one zoning thing that I'm curious about, and I should have just looked it up myself, but I didn't know I was going to be chairing. I should have thought that through. If this lot had a front, would we have frontage issues, front setback issues?
Well, I guess it depends on where the.
Which would the front be? I would guess the front would be the side toward Beach Street. And you've got 49.3 feet there to the garage, correct?
Correct.
And which zone are we in here?
Well, we're in the zone B, I believe. I'm sorry,
yeah.
C. We're in C. We're in
C. Okay.
So if we're getting a little funny with how you would measure that, and I'll talk about that in a second. But
yeah,
when you have streets or right of ways that are less than 40 feet,
yep.
Essentially, you want to treat it like it's a 40-foot right of way, and then add the setback. So they want 50 feet to the center line of the road. So because you have a 30-foot setback, and they essentially treat all right of ways like they're 40 feet, even if it's less than 40 feet. And if it's less, then you measure to the center line, and you measure 50 feet.
Mm-hmm. So, but it isn't really relevant to there anyway. But then we have that's a property line that is headed up. That's the Weltman Atkins house.
Yes.
So there's a property line there that is, I won't say parallel to Beach Street, but it's more so than Keene Lane. All right. I don't really have a question here. I have it might even be a philosophical question for zoning about getting the benefit of having all side setbacks as opposed to a front setback anywhere. But be that as it may.
Yeah, and I don't know, philosophically, maybe you could argue that, not that it would happen in every case, but I guess a lot that has all sides must be disconnected from a street, must be set back rather,
No question.
conceptually. So maybe that's the trade-off. I don't know, because we're always trying
Yeah.
to get buildings off of the front yard and the
Yeah.
rear yard. Whereas this, even if this had a front, if we call that the front, the rear is pretty generous.
Yeah, and you don't normally look to the relationship to the abutter in a front capacity anyway. It's a side capacity, and we got almost 50 feet here. So anyway,
Yeah.
I'm digressing, and we have a lot to do this evening. Sorry.
No, and we had the same digression before we started this. So getting back to, did you have a question, Dave?
I did. It said that the previous garage was demolished. When was it demolished? How long ago?
Within the last year.
February, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it has not reached the abandonment stage, to my knowledge. So as far as the dock is concerned, what we're doing down here is really resurrecting something that existed at one time. And we're doing it with one of these modest, I call these modest docks, because there's really no pier. We're just putting back, there was a pier at one time, there's remnants of a pier. Some posts that are in the ground here, and the stairs that come down to the lower area. What we're proposing to do is to just rebuild this last concrete area, eliminate the 2 steps to really create a level landing, and affix a seasonably removable ramp and float. So it will look like in profile, if I get to it here, here's the profile. So the plan is to rebuild this concrete area at the bottom that exists today, essentially fill in the 2 steps to create a receiver for a ramp that will sit atop a float. And this will be removed seasonally.
This is like the Veraki or the 88B versions.
That's correct.
I guess my only question is, why are you doing it so close to the lot line?
Just because that's where the access is, the existing access, to try to maintain. There's not a lot of access other than going to the other side of the lot. So the idea was to really rework what was already there.
What is the setback of the, I guess the closest point would be the top of the ramp?
Yeah, and that's 10 feet.
10 feet?
Yes.
Oh, I see, 10-4, okay.
So again, we're sort of holding that existing. We're bringing it closer, further away than what was there.
When was that
Louisa,
last
yeah,
there?
she said it was destroyed by a storm, and I honestly, I can't recall. In the fairly not too distant past, but not either.
Is there a record of a permit for that at any point in time?
No. This would be a local 10A permit. This would not require a Chapter 91 license because we're not doing any permanent work below mean high water.
Any questions by the board? Charlie?
What are these placed boulders next to the dock?
Those are existing. They're
Are they at sea bottom level or?
Well, they sit on the ground. They sit at grade. They're just maybe remnants from when they built a little revetment over here.
Well, does the floating dock float on them? On the end of it?
Yeah, we're going to remove some of these boulders. So this,
Okay.
yeah, that's
Fine.
the idea, to remove the boulders. Probably just relocate them over here.
So this dock is a dock that will be floating at certain tides and not floating at others.
That's correct.
Is it approximately the same protrusion from the shore as the previous dock?
I would guess, not knowing exactly what was there, but figuring that you probably didn't have anything much longer. It's possible that they had a pier here of some sorts with a ramp. I don't know, honestly.
It's all supposition. All right. Other questions from the board? Jen, are there any audience members who are in attendance who want to talk, or have we heard anything from any of the neighbors? I don't know. Jen,
I'm
did you
here.
hear the question?
I'm having trouble finding my button because of the screen share. Sorry. No, there are no questions. And so I'm just looking now and no one has raised their hand to speak.
Okay, thank you. Charlie, did you have another question?
No.
Would anybody like to make a motion to continue this to our January hearing?
I move we continue to January.
How about a second?
Dave McMorris, second.
All those in favor? I'll take them as I see them. Matt?
Matt Watkins, aye.
Charlie? Lee?
Aye.
And David?
Aye.
This hearing is continued until January.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy holidays.
Thanks.
Thank you, Jen.
We're going to miss you on the last hearing, John.
I will be thinking of you all. Sweet dreams.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is Woody Chittick, so I'll take over again. We have one last new hearing. It's at 72 North Main Street, filed by Morse Engineering on behalf of their client, who are the Vanderwiles, to construct a dock under, so they are seeking relief under 9.7 as well as 4.2.
Woody,
Yeah.
I need to recuse myself as a direct abutter.
Okay. Okay, so Peter's recused, so there are 5 of us.
In case anybody wants to know where the dock's going to be, it's right behind my head on the virtual background.
Okay, well, occasionally we may ask you to move one way or another, Peter, so we can
All
get
right, I'll try to keep
a
listening.
close-up of the site. But all right, so who's Jeff? Are you handling this?
Yes, Jeff.
And
Hassett
please
here.
introduce yourself, so because it's being recorded.
Sure, Jeff Hassett here, civil engineer with Morse Engineering. I'm here on behalf of the property owners, Alex and Lucinda Vanderweel. And would it be okay if I shared my screen?
Oh, absolutely.
All right. All right. All right, so on behalf of the property owners, we're seeking a special permit for a residential dock at 72 North Main Street. The property is 1.8 acres in size. It's developed with a single family home up closer to North Main Street. It's abutted by developed residential properties on either side. It has frontage on North Main Street to the west, and it has about 300 feet of frontage on Little Harbor to the east. So the proposed dock will extend from the lawn area at the southerly side of the lot right here. And So that dock will begin at the edge of the existing lawn, which is defined by a retaining wall down to the salt marsh. From that point, it is a fixed pier extending over the salt marsh. The pier is only 35 feet long by 4 feet wide. We're providing the minimum 1-to-1 horizontal to vertical separation and the 1-inch spacing between the decking. From there is a 3-foot wide by 24-foot long gangway to the float. And this float is really for canoes, kayaks during mid to high tide. As far as setbacks, it is 57 feet off the lot line. So zoning is a minimum of 6 for an accessory structure. And the DEP recommends 25 feet where you can. And this is our first stop in the permitting process. We have conservation later in the week. And once we get through the town level, we'll be filing with the DEP Waterways Division, as well as the Army Corps of Engineers. Thank you.
Okay, where's Dave? Dave is part of this as well as Matt. Where's Dave?
I'm here.
There you go. You got any questions?
Nope.
Matt, you're our other doc guy.
Yeah, I'm Doc Junior here.
Yeah.
I'll probably be writing it as David just. But no, I don't. I think you explained it pretty well. I don't think I have any questions myself.
Thank you.
Charlie?
Part of our packet included a view restriction. I think in this area, and there could be no structure over 7 feet. This isn't involve the zoning board, but certainly the builder ought to, where you enter the platform. What is that height? If it's over 7 feet, you've got troubles with the view restriction.
Maybe could you slide over a little bit so we could get the vertical on the yeah, there you go.
Yep. So the elevation is 9.5, but that's above mean sea level. We're providing 5-foot clearance at one point. So yeah, it's about 5 feet off the ground. I'll look more into the view restriction and make sure we comply with that though.
It would seem now would be the time to do it. You don't want to sort of find yourself, 2 months down the road and, having to come back and see everybody again.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll inquire about that right away.
Yeah. I don't know anything about the view restriction, but Charlie, does that apply to all structures around Little Harbor or just in this area?
It's specific, I don't quite understand it, but in our folder, there was a deed which set forth this, this restriction. No trees and no structures over 7 feet.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, it's in the deed for this property?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
we'll make sure we comply with that. I'll get a legal opinion on it if we have to.
And I presume it would apply to the railing at the top of the structures.
Yeah, I think it does.
Yeah. We did have a case where, because you could look through it, but it was not here. It was over in the Gulf, where because you could look through the railings up there, that whatever the easement was didn't count it. But that was specific to that site, not this one. So.
Yeah, the railings here would be about 5.5 feet higher than the lawn elevation at the lowest point. So even if you measure to the railing, it might be okay, but it's something we'll certainly look into.
You might as well do it now and resolve it. But it sounds like the board, does the board have any other questions? Otherwise, I'd make a motion to continue this for.
I have another. why are you putting the dock here rather than at the end of the old dock?
You mean off to the left?
Yeah, this is the preferred location for the property owners.
Fine.
Does the land slope down here? Is that?
I mean, it's pretty consistent throughout the frontage on Little Harbor. You have a top of wall at about elevation 7, and then pretty much the same width of salt marsh to span. So we did draw it over at the other location at the end of the walkway at one point, but at the owner's request, they prefer to have it over here.
Fine. That's their choice.
Yeah.
Because it used to be a dock. They used to lobster off of that.
Okay, well, any other information that we would like to see from the applicants in January? Otherwise,
I have one
Go ahead,
question here. Are there only 2 pilings above mean high water? The first set?
Correct.
I think that's the extent of our concern, isn't it?
Yeah.
Actually, there aren't any above mean high water.
They're all below.
Yeah. No, it would.
Well, there would have to be a way to access it. That proposed ramp would probably, laughably, is probably about the only thing we have jurisdiction over. Yeah, our jurisdiction stops at mean high.
Right.
And you have to have a way to get onto the dock, and that's probably what we
It's not on the
gotta deal
pilings.
with. What?
It's not on the pilings. It's where the landing on the above the seawall is.
Yeah, and that would probably be within our jurisdiction only.
Yeah, because those pilings are below the seawall, so they're 6, 7 feet down, I think. 3 or 4 anyway.
Yeah, that's correct. The only portion of this project above mean high water is that ramp that might be 3 feet long.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's hardly cosmic, but
Now, the view restriction is something that it's really not a zoning thing. It's a matter between the two. It's a matter in their deed. Is that something that could be conditioned to keep the project moving? That be resolved before construction?
yeah, and if it weren't resolved, you'd end up in land court. So
Exactly.
Absolutely no reason not to, unless unless you had no way around a redesign. I mean, it's possible it would. I don't know what, And if it was a redesign, you might have to come back here. But I think you could move ahead, but it would behoove you to not do any thinking on the fly here, if you know what I mean. Take a little time and figure out if you comply or if you're going to have to do some sort of redesign. Hopefully not.
Yeah, it's definitely something that we're going to get an answer on. Make sure before we.
I mean, it isn't like it's we're talking about an awful lot of elapsed time here, particularly with the holidays and everything. But excuse me, if it required a redesign, you'd be back here, most likely. You'd be citing it differently or doing something. And why not resolve it? It shouldn't take a month. It should take a day or 2. Sounds like you'd like to have us. If we close the hearing, we're still going to meet and on a decision in January. So you're not going to buy yourself a lot of time. Typically, our practice, as you know, is to draft a decision for discussion, for deliberation at our next hearing.
Okay.
And Charlie, I see the deed in our packet, but I had overlooked the reference of the view easement, but it is directly in this proposed location.
Yeah, I overlooked it.
Charlie, is that your understanding, is that it's right in this?
I'm not sure, but by my reading, I thought it was, but I'm not sure. That's part of that's one of the issues that should be looked into.
Yeah. I mean, do it now, Jeff, as opposed to find that you have to sort of, I don't know, refile or do something. Because once we close the hearing, it's closed.
Okay, I'm agreeable to that. That's
Yeah, I mean, it's
we
not
can
obviously,
continue and resolve it in the meantime.
you're not hearing a lot of pushback here, but
Right. Okay.
my concern is more a redesign, not is it legal or what does it involve?
Sure. Okay, I understand that.
Okay. I'd make a motion that we continue this hearing until January 5th.
Second.
Jen, do we have anybody who wants to speak in favor or in opposition to this?
We do not.
Okay. So my motion has been made. Need
And
a second?
I'll second it. Matt Watkins.
Okay, we need 5 of us. Woody Chitik, aye.
Lee Doris, aye.
Lee? Charlie?
Carol Higginson, aye.
Okay. Matt?
Matt Watkins, aye.
And Dave McMorris.
Aye.
The passing of the torch. Okay. That concludes our hearings for the night. We have a continued hearing on 31 River Road, a continued hearing on 62 Rust Way, 2 appeals, which I do want to take a vote on. A continued hearing on 12487 Elm Street. Did we, Peter, how did you leave the Kasdan? Did you close that hearing or?
No, we continued it.
Okay. So that's continued, and then this one is continued. So the only piece of business beyond approving our minutes, which should be rather quick, are the 2 appeals before us on 488 Jerusalem. And Cindy was good enough to draft 2 motions, both of which deny the appeal. The appeals is filed. But is there any other wording change, anything that we should be aware of, or can we go with your wording, Cindy? And Cindy, go ahead.
I drafted these based on my notes from the last meeting and Jen's notes and the draft minutes. So these were my best effort at what I thought the board wanted to do. So I don't know that I'm the right person to answer your question. I think they're what the board wanted to do, but if I'm wrong, I think the board needs to tell me.
Let me mention to the board and would talk about it for a couple of minutes. The way this reads, and I will read it, to deny the appeal, and I'll skip over some references for the raising and reconstruction of the house, to the extent the building permit authorizes work allowed as of right under the bylaw, but not authorizing any additional work. And see, I thought that what we had authorized was clearly anything as of right under the bylaw, but also to the extent that the 2018 building permit authorized certain construction.
I think that's specifically what we did.
Yeah, so I think we want to insert that reference to the 2018 building permit, because the building permit really can't authorize work allowed as of right. Well, I mean, the building permit
it does,
but the zoning decision.
You mean the special permit?
Yeah, the special permit doesn't apply to structures as of right. Dave?
I don't think, I think there's a building permit for the 2018 special permit that's not under appeal here. I think the building permit that's under appeal is the one that they got for the 8.9 reconstruction.
That was my understanding.
We did a cease and desist, and to be clear, we said you have to stop everything except what was expressly authorized under the 2018 special permit and what's authorized under 8.9. But I think as to the building permit itself, the only one that's under appeal is the 8.9.
Is that right? Okay.
And that's the raise and reconstruct, correct?
Yep. I think I'm correct that there was a separate building permit for the 2018 special permit.
There's Bob.
Bob?
He knows.
Yeah, there was. There was, two building permits, one for the work authorized by the special permit and the second one for the work allowed under 8.9.
And the second one is the one that's under appeal.
I think you're right, yeah.
Okay, so this,
I think this addresses the right permit.
all right. Does anybody on the board disagree with Cindy?
Oh, but I think we specifically said what we were telling them they couldn't do was build beyond the, rebuild beyond the dimensions, I guess, of the 2018 permit. Wasn't that what we said last?
Well,
I mean,
Cease and desist.
go ahead, Cindy.
I thought last week was the cease and desist, and they couldn't build beyond what the special permit allowed them to do or what they could do of right. And that was one set of permits. My understanding of these two appeals that were left deal with the raise and reconstruction, and that deals with building within the existing footprint of the house or the dwelling or the structure that they raised. So I don't believe that the special permit falls under these appeals, but it is if.
Yeah, you're right. The special permit is granted. It was silent on this. I mean, this didn't come, the raise and rebuild didn't come before us.
Yeah, I think we mentioned the special permit in our cease and desist decision, just for clarity, so that he would know what he had to stop and what he didn't have to stop.
Okay, well, if this language is appropriate, I certainly would make two motions. I'll take them one at a time. The first is to deny the appeal filed by the Wyndhams of the building, inspector's issuance of a permit, and including but not limited to, to deny their appeal.
I'd like the motion to include the language that Cindy drafted.
Okay.
Because it's more specific as to what's being denied.
Okay. Do you want me to read it? Or do you want me to have Cindy read it or what? Cindy, go ahead.
No, I just have one question. Did you already vote to close the hearing?
We have closed the hearing.
I'm sorry, I missed that. Okay.
Yeah, and we closed it with the understanding of both parties that their appeal would be dealt with here in our deliberation.
I just was not clear as to whether you had actually voted to close it. My apologies.
Yeah, no, we closed it. Okay, so a motion by Mr. Chittick to deny the appeal number 20.07.23 of the building inspector's issuance of building permit number R-20-0182 for the raising and reconstruction of the house located at 488 Jerusalem Road. I've already mentioned the file number. To the extent the building permit authorizes work allowed as of right under the bylaw, but not authorizing any additional work, including but not limited to increased height and massing within the setback until and unless Ryan Stasko, trustee of Boulder Arnett Trust and landowner of 488 Jerusalem Road, files for and receives a special permit under 300-8.9, which is the raise and reconstruct section of the bylaw. So that motion's been made by me.
Dave McMorris, second.
Dave has seconded it. All in favor, Woody Chittick, aye.
Lee Darst, aye.
Lee.
Joe Atkinson, aye.
Oh.
Matt Watkins, aye.
Okay, and
Peter
Dave,
Gerdeck, aye.
okay, and Dave, I guess you seconded, but you want to just.
Dave McMorris, aye.
Okay, now the second appeal is, wait a minute, let me read that. The second motion is again made by me, Woody Chidick, to deny the appeal file, this time file number 20.07.29 of the building permit, of the building inspector's, letter of July 1st, 2020, and to confirm the issuance of the June 18, 2020 building permit to 488 Jerusalem Road to the extent that the building permit authorizes work allowed as of right under the bylaw, but not authorizing any additional work, including but not limited to increased height, the dormer facing Linden Drive, and the southeasterly addition until and unless Ryan Stasko, trustee of Boulder Arnett Trust and landowner of 488 Jerusalem Road, files for and receives a special permit modifying the 2018 special permit. So I made that motion. Second?
Dave McMorris, second.
Dave is seconded. Woody Chidick, aye.
Lee Darcey.
Carl Higginson, aye.
Matt Watkins, aye.
Peter Gertic, aye.
Dave McMorris, aye.
All right. Just one little side comment, Jen, you're listening in. We didn't really ask Adam on the 124 and 87, but I'd like him to submit something in writing dealing with the 5 conditions under 9.7H. Okay, there are 5 conditions, and typically with that would want an affirmative statement. It does not, contribute to pollution and blah blah blah.
I believe he addressed those in the first submission. I'll look.
Okay.
It's one way back in April. I'm gonna.
Oh, all right. Well, if he has, he has. But
yeah, no, I'll make sure I get it so that it's
just circulate it to us
so
that we will have considered it. I mean,
Yeah, it might come from John too, rather than.
right. I think I recall he said that he addressed 1 through 5 this evening, but I will just pull the.
I don't recall him speaking specifically.
Not today.
Okay. No, he didn't speak to it. He just said he had submitted a memo. So
right.
I'll pull it.
Find out.
Yep. And then just to go back, if I may, Mr. Chairman, to the appeals, I believe we would need to draft at least a 1-pager for each appeal to file with the town clerk. Cindy, do you agree? Okay. So
We have standard language.
She's muted.
I read her lips though. She said yes.
What she actually said is, "I'm out of here," but we won't
yeah,
say
peace
anything.
out. So I'll work with Cindy and then if it's okay with Woody to get those drafted.
Okay, could we, because there's a little bit of business, but could we approve the minutes that were in our packet, September 8th, 22nd, October 6th, and November 22nd, as drafted by Jan? I mean, there was 1 or 2 little spell check things.
Sure,
which
and I know
I'll get you, but
great. And
Yeah,
Peter sent me
typically
things
happens.
as well, so perfect.
Yeah, I haven't looked at the last one.
But you can vote them as all of them as amended, and then just to get me.
yeah, as amended. I mean, I had a couple of things that I just didn't maybe understand.
Okay.
And didn't follow it, but
All right.
it is a phrase.
10 or 12
Just my-
edits. I have 10 or 12 edits. I will, in red, and I will pass them to Jen and.
Right, now I'll do the same.
But
I
they are
appreciate
not
that.
substantive. I have one substantive question.
Okay.
Cindy, on page 3 of the, what was it, of the November 17 hearing, it states that Cindy does have an issue with them for securing the building and making it weather tight. Did you do, I thought you were in accord with that.
I saw that too. I think that's a typo.
Okay, fine.
I think
just-
it did not have an issue. I think it did not have an issue.
But I just thought that was a little bit more than an edit, so I wanted to bring it up.
Thank you, Charlie.
I agree.
Great, thank you. So we just need a motion and a second as amended for.
I don't want to
all.
make a motion. I'm tired of making motions.
I'll make a motion that we accept.
Good work.
I guess
Okay,
it would be-
second. Lee is seconding. All right. Go ahead, you guys. All in favor?
Dave McMorris, aye.
Carl Higginson, aye.
Lee, you're waving, but speak to us. Okay, Woody Chidick, aye.
Lee Darcey.
Peter Gertic, aye.
Peter and Matt.
Matt Watkins, aye.
Now, two things very, very quickly. Bob, when do you leave? When's your last day of work?
I'm gonna, the official day will be the end of the month. So I'm gonna be coming in, part-time, working with John and.
This is going to be weird. Is there any, are we deferring or, some sort of a farewell? I mean, it's not right for you just to sort of disappear off the Zoom screen.
Yeah,
never to be seen again.
Times have changed. Yeah.
We're going to do something this summer. We're going to do something this summer.
Because there are always, traditionally, there's been a meet and greet. It's just that you have been here so long.
Yeah, it'll be different. Yeah.
All right. Well, I mean, we all, thank you so much. I mean,
well, thank you all.
Incalculable.
Yeah.
And you've
This
always
is my
done it
favorite.
with a
This
smile.
is my favorite board.
All right, we better move on.
I'm not going to say
dangerous.
I'm trying to say, whoa, I think
damnation with faint praise.
I think I know where he is. So, hey, John, what can you tell us about yourself that you'd like us to know? We'll, have plenty of time to get to know you better. But
yeah, I'm sure you will. As I say tonight, I recognize a lot of the faces on the other side of the board, having spent 12 years at Situate Zoning Board of Appeals, 3 years as chairman. So,
we're gonna be able to tap into you.
I go, okay, memory. So, yep, I understand your work and diligence that you played in, and certainly feel some of that. So that's some of where I've come from over the years. And before I started this job, I've been for the last 5.5 years over as a local building inspector in Hingham. And then prior to that, ran a construction company for 35 years. So that's some of my background coming into this. And as Bob's been kind enough to spend a little time and show me some of the ropes and the ins and outs of what's going on. A little history has been taking place for me the last few days. So that's worked out pretty well.
Was your construction company in residential or primarily commercial or a mix? Or
I know generally I'm mostly residential. Worked Situate, Hingham, Cohasset area over the years.
Anything else for the moment? Charlie?
Where do you come from?
I grew up in Situate and live in Hingham now.
Got us covered.
Right, to both sides.
Well, it's great. I mean, obviously, Bob is certainly going to be missed. There's no question in my estimation of that. I mean, I don't think there's a more pleasant guy, Bob. I mean, a person is nicer to work with than you, and a guy that knows more about zoning. I mean, it's astounds me, but of course, this is your job.
I think we should
there's a lot of people have made it work. You and the board included, but especially Jen. She's the one that makes it work. As I say, I'm really not the department head. Jen is.
Spoken like a good boss. A good boss would say that, and hats off to you, Dave.
John, to be aware of that.
I think we should put Bob first on our list of post-vaccination parties.
Okay, I agree.
That sounds good.
Well, thank you.
We love working with Bob, and it's going to be weird, but that's why we're not going to really let him go. We're also going to put a tracer on his phone, so it's not going to be a problem.
That's good. That's good. We haven't. I mean, you're basically all I knew. I don't know who was your predecessor, Bob. But before I kill this,
there was Don Robbins. He was there for only 2 years.
Yeah.
And then there were successes before. There was Mr. Poskis. Ed Poskis. Yeah. So
anyway, he was something else.
Yeah.
And there was a woman too, who had a mouth like an army sergeant.
Right. Sure, that's not me.
Oh no, believe me. Anyway, they're all colorful. Anyway, well, we're certainly gonna miss you, but you can't go out this way. It's got to be a little more pizzazz.
Okay, well,
Absolutely.
thank you for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And welcome,
A lot
John.
more.
Yes,
So-
I don't think we could have a more qualified replacement. So that sounds great.
Yeah, I'm encouraged. This, thank goodness. Because we really are dependent on the building inspector for so many of these things that. Oh my, oh well. Anyway, so I would make a motion to adjourn and also
Woody, as far as,
welcome John Hallen aboard.
Wait, do we need to draft some decisions? Just the docs?
Yeah,
Sorry.
I could do the 72 North Main. It sounds like there's a potential it might change, but I think.
Jen, maybe you could have Jeff tip you off if he thinks he's got to change because of the view easement. You could get back to Matt and just give him a heads up.
Sure.
It might impact the way the draft is constructed.
I'll do the.
Okay, so we have two.
But if he has to change, he's going to have to put it in a different place.
Yeah, and
So
he'll
it's gonna-
probably have to
Do we
come
need-
back. That's right.
Yeah, and he'd have to come back.
Yeah, okay.
I
I'll
think
do the, I'll do the Caston, the 88 Beach.
Okay.
and that was it, I think.
Well, we have the 31 River, and Matt, who drafted that? Dave
Dave-
McMorris.
They're gonna amend their application.
Right,
Yeah,
I got it done and then they screwed it up. So
Oh, no, it was a nice decision. Charlie.
Well, it will probably be pretty close to the same decision. David, it's 11.5 feet from the borderline, not 12 in your decision.
okay, and the garage.
Yeah.
I was interested that they kind of John Cavanaro picked up where the sentiment of the board without even discussing it might have been going, but he didn't even give us a chance to debate the outcome.
You're talking about Rust?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know whether it's body language or what.
Yeah. I mean, you could hold your nose, I suppose, but it's so flagrant. An intensification of an already intense.
Yeah.
We're
into deliberation mode, and I don't think we can.
Yeah, no.
Quite go there right at this point. But yeah, and who else what other decision? I'm happy to take one, but
I think that's it. We just need to do the appeals, which I'll work with Cindy on, and then
I'll do the Harbor Partners Classic when that time comes.
Okay.
And I think that's pretty much, I didn't want to get too pushy, but I really think they need some parking contingency plan because that whole harbor is going to be different, totally transformed. And, where there are 2-3 cars today, they're going to be 23.
I'll be argumentative on this one, Woody. I think it's a market issue, whether or not people will actually buy spaces that flood. But routinely, in the case, I think of the 87, I think those are going to flood routinely.
Yeah.
And I think the ones at 124 may flood every so often.
Well, if they flood, they'll also drain quickly. But I mean,
yeah, but you're still getting. I mean, if you think about the yacht club, which is higher than the Elm Street thing, of course, it's more directly wave action. I think the market's going to tell these people that they're not going to be able to sell them, and I don't know whether it's a zoning issue per se or not, but it's sure an economic.
Well, we have a responsibility anyway. Let's see what they come up with from a contingency plan, because I do think it is a question of both pollution and public safety and convenience.
Is it the public or the owners?
Well, our charge is really more the public than the private.
Yeah, and I think it's the owners who are going to have their cars flooded.
Yeah, but where do they go? Do they go to somebody's driveway? Do they, congest the street? I don't know. Anyway, let's see what they come up with. I mean, these are all good questions, but let's.
When I was considering developing 88B Beach Street, I was trying to figure out where I was going to put the cars in the garage that I thought was going to flood.
Yeah.
And the answer was probably the town hall parking lot.
Well, let's see what they come up with. Okay, so I would make a motion to continue, not continue, adjourn. Sorry, I'm getting really whacked out here. Adjourn. So I've made a motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Bill
Raise your
Higginson,
eye.
aye.
Yeah. All right, who haven't we heard from?
Peter Gerdekai.
Okay,
Dave McMorris, aye.
all right, so precisely at 10 o'clock, 10 p.m. on the button.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, we got through a
Good
lot
night,
of
all.
work. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Have a good holiday, everybody. Be safe.
Bye.
Okay, y'all.
Thank you.